Right after the events of Chapter 31, Chapter 32 begins with the Vanderleydens hosting a dinner party. We're told that this happens in a curiously theatrical phrasing. The scene was the Vanderleydens' black walnut dining room in Madison Avenue, and the evening after Newland Archer's visit to the Museum of Art. The scene here highlights the performative spectacle. Obviously, the specific time that we are told. The time and place suggests the dimensions of strict realism and the Aristotelian consistency of place, the rules he laid out, or Aristotle laid out in terms of narrative logic in his Poetics, emphasizing again that realist grounding, always bringing it back to realism, and here in a context of the hard social realism of New York society and the judges that are now gathering to mull over the developments in their midst. The party guests are assembled as a united front of traditional New York society. We're told the gathering is right before they'll be attending the opera, where Faust is once again playing, just as it did in the opening scene of the novel. And while the talk of the party is largely about the melodramatic plot and the elements of the Beaufort scandal, and also of the imprudence of Ellen failing to shun her cousin, Mrs. Beaufort, in this. The scene itself is haunted with callbacks to that earlier opera scene. When they go there, where we follow Archer through this somewhat cold rendition of remembering the ghost of that earlier evening that so changed his life when Ellen Olenska walked into his life. Archer, after the first act, had detached himself from the party and made his way to the back of the club box. From there he watched over various Chivers, Mingotts, and Rushworth's shoulders the same scene he had looked at 2 years previously on the night of his first meeting with Ellen Olenska. He had half expected her to appear again in old Mrs. Mingotts' box, but it remained empty, and he sat motionless, his eyes fastened on it, till suddenly Madame Nilsson's pure soprano broke out into "Mamma, non m'ama," and here there's that song again that we heard at the beginning, the "He loves me not." The melodrama of it seems to be a bit of a mockery, almost, of the melodrama of his life, but perhaps he is sensing that. Perhaps we are only half sensing that. The oddness with which he is moving through this scene and sort of seeing it from another perspective, an alienated perspective, is notable, I think. The emptiness of the box now, it is now symbolic of his life is somehow empty, perhaps. The absence he feels of Ellen Olenska is really quite profound. Once again, however, we have that blending as he looks from one scene to the other. The blending of the stage and the audience, the performativity of both is once again noted. Archer turned to the stage where, in the familiar setting of giant roses and pen wiper pansies, the same large blonde victim was succumbing to the same small town seducer. From the stage, his eyes wandered to the point of the horseshoe, where May sat between two older ladies, just as, on that former evening, she had sat between Mrs. Lovell Mingott and her newly arrived foreign cousin. As on that evening, she was all in white, and Archer, who had not noticed what she wore, recognized the blue-white satin and old lace of her wedding dress. We're told that it is somewhat traditional for newly married women to wear their wedding dress out in the first year or so of their marriage. But the echo of the earlier scene highlights the strangeness of the current scene. The image of May is now minus the freshness and individuality of Olenska in that box. and it's replaced with bland and anonymous two older ladies, suggesting that perhaps May is herself morphing into one of those older ladies. The white dress that had signaled purity in the earlier incarnation now symbolizes her married status. But the yoking of this image to its predecessor suggests that the wedding dress, the wedding identity, is now something more tarnished, perhaps. It's more imposing. It is now become a prison for Archer. The white of virginity of the first image is now the paleness of death in the recent current incarnation. And that meaning is only suggested through the juxtaposition, through the matching of one image with the next. That joining of images creates a new meaning. The combination of one image and meaning with another produces a third level of meaning, which is a foundational tenet of modernist aesthetics. But the chapter ends. It can't stay on that modernist little twist. It has to go back into a kind of realism, because those two elements of the narration are always struggling. The chapter ends after the opera, when Archer and May are back home, and he wants to talk to her. He's agitated by something. He fakes a headache to say, can we just go home? Let's get out of here. He's bothered by what he's feeling there. They get back home, and they're sitting, and he says, well, look, I want to talk. And he wants to come out to her, essentially, and say, okay, I have this change of heart. Maybe he wants to break it off. Maybe he wants to tell her of his love for Ellen. He never gets to. The melodrama comes surging back, and we're told that, Ellen is now planning to return to Europe without her husband. This note, this return to realism, comes in the form of a note. We're told that a letter has arrived from Ellen to May, and she takes it out and she reads it and she shows it to him. And the letter as a turning point, the letter as a serious plot point, as a big reveal, is a staple of realist narrative, and the obviousness of the motif of reading really needs no further comment. But you can see this struggle back and forth between this element of modernist storytelling, element of modernist aesthetics, poking through and wrestling with this tradition of realism that keeps dominating. And Wharton is toggling back and forth between these two, trying to find the voice for one. And maybe that's just what this is supposed to be. This is not even supposed to be the story of Ellen and May and Archer, but a struggle of one form of art to crack out of another, of modernism trying to leave the shackles of realism behind. That's what you see again and again and again throughout this book. That's what you see again and again in this struggle, that Archer essentially is reaching towards something new, something uncertain, something he has only the vaguest idea about, some idea of himself that is ultimately slipping through his fingers. And that's kind of what the art of this novel is also doing.